News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. This weekend it's going to be a bit of a mixed bank holiday. The driest weather expected on Saturday for most of us. Will turn a bit more unsettled as the weekend goes on. But through this evening, the pressure pattern really settles down and that will set us up for a much drier and colder night to come tonight. There are areas of cloud and rain we've seen across northern areas will slowly drift northwards through the next few hours, and these clearer skies across the south will become more widespread, pushing into parts of southern Scotland by the morning. There's a chance of some mist and fog across some southern counties, and it's going to be a fresh start. As I say, temperatures could be down as low as 3 or 4 degrees across parts of Wales, southern areas of England as well. But it will warm up fairly quickly as the sun will shine first thing. We could see some sunshine first thing across the northeast of Scotland, where we're sheltered from that more southerly wind. Thicker cloud though further south and west. Still some drizzly rain, but I think things will improve through the day here. Elsewhere across much of England and Wales, it will be a dry and bright start, but some mist and fog may allow some drizzly rain. Notice, though, we do have this area of quite persistent rain moving into the south and east. That's moving in from parts of Europe, and that could bring some very heavy rain to eastern areas potentially. So a bit of a wet day is on the cards for eastern areas of England. Just some areas, actually most of us, should stay dry through the day on Saturday, and it's going to feel much warmer than it has done today. Highs of around 22 degrees in the south, closer to 19 degrees across the north. But under the cloud, it's going to be a bit of a disappointing day. Things turn much more.
The next Great British Giveaway winner could be you, with a massive £20,000 in tax-free cash to be won. Imagine how you'd react getting that winning call from us.
Oh my God, are you joking?
Not a line, I never won a penny in my life.
I don't know what to say.
Do you know what? I've never won anything like this in my life.
Oh my God. Oh God. Oh, it shocks me.
This is amazing.
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to me to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
Well, that has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May and presumably his very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change, you've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Ray Addison in the GB Newsroom. Headliners is up next, but first our top stories tonight. Andrea Leadsom has become the latest MP to announce that she will not be standing at the general election. In a letter to the Prime Minister, the Health Minister said that she had come to the decision after careful reflection, but did not go into further detail. It comes shortly after Michael Gove posted his resignation letter, saying it's time for a new generation to lead. 78 Tory MPs are now leaving Parliament, a post-war record-breaking exodus. Rishi Sunak was greeted by a group of pro-Palestine protesters as he visited a college in the West Midlands this afternoon. The situation was described as tense as the PM arrived at South Staffordshire College in Cannock, the last stop on his UK tour. Police officers formed a guard for Mr Sunak as his entry to the college was delayed, and he was quickly ushered into the building as the crowd surged around him. Whilst inside, activists with banners and flags chanted, "Free Palestine." Labour has ruled out any deals with the SNP after the election, even in the event of a hung parliament. Sir Keir Starmer has been campaigning in the east of Glasgow today, which is one of the seats he's hoping to take from John Swinney's party. Sir Keir said the SNP's only ambition is to break up the UK, and there would be absolutely no deal with the Scottish nationalists. GB News can reveal that more than 10,000 Channel migrants have crossed illegally to the UK so far this year. The milestone figure was reached today after another 154 people arrived in Dover, having crossed in 3 small boats this morning. Another boat arrived this evening with 53 people on board. It's a blow for Rishi Sunak on his second full day of election campaigning after he promised that his government would stop the boats. Former boss of the Post Office has been accused of living in La La Land over her role in the Horizon scandal. Paula Venables became emotional again today, her third day, giving evidence. She admitted making mistakes and accepted that there was no one else to blame, but claimed that she didn't know why important information didn't reach her. Sam Stein KC described that as absolute rubbish. He suggested that Ms Venables had failed to ask the right questions because the risk was too great. And lastly, the documentary filmmaker Morgan Spurlock has died at the age of 53. He came to prominence with his Oscar-nominated film Super Size Me in 2004, which tracked his health while he ate nothing but McDonald's for a whole month. The film was credited with prompting a broader conversation about fast food and how rising obesity was impacting society. Mr Spurlock passed away in New York due to complications from cancer. Right, for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or why not go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now, it's over to our headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners. It's your first look at Saturday's newspapers with 3 comedians. That's me, Andrew Doyle, and I'm joined tonight by the big dog, Nick Dixon, and the little pussycat, Steve N. Allen. I'm hoping that catches on. Meow. Because, yeah, you do that very well, and you've got a very sort of affectionate quality, which people at home don't really gather, but the way you behave here.
And I can reach, if that's what the question was. Very flexible.
You are certainly flexible. That one of your greatest
Is that what you're
attributes.
implying?
No, not at all. But since you've mentioned it, how are you, Nick?
Well, yeah, loving life. You know me, chilling. People are trying to attack me all the time, Andy, but I'm just very chilled, going with the flow of the universe.
You're like titanium, like that song.
Absolutely. Shoot me down, but I won't fall.
There you go. That should be your slogan. Anyway, let's have a look at Saturday's front pages before we dig in. The Daily Mail is leading with Reeves, I'll never play fast and loose loose with your money. Sounds like a lyric, that one. The Telegraph has got inheritance tax against Tory values, says Hunt. The Guardian is running with UN top court orders Israel to halt assault on Rafah. The Times are leading with Gove quits politics as more Tories stand down. The Express has got the same story there about Michael Gove. And finally, the Daily Star, we've beaten the curse of snoring with, wait for it, didgeridoos. Those were your front pages. Right, so we're kicking off our look into Saturday's front pages. Going to start with the Mirror, Steve, and they're going with quite a partisan headline.
Now Gove quits Sunak's sinking ship.
Yeah.
There's a reason, but it's not just partisan. There's more punnery at work in there.
Oh, yes?
So the main headline thing is that Michael Gove's decided to not continue the fight. He now joins... I mean, according to the article, it was 77, but I think this was before Andrea Leadsom.
Yeah, so
she
it's
was going
78
to 78.
now, maybe more.
My Panini sticker book of Tories is now incredibly out of date, and I'm going to have to start collecting it. This is what's really annoying about the general election. The sinking ship thing is because there was an event that Rishi Sunak went to the Titanic Museum.
Yes, but I think if they were...
It's not great PR, though, is
No.
it? It's like turning up to the Museum of Pooch Screwing and see what the headlines are going to be.
Why would you do that? Why would you? But having said that, I think the Mirror ran this headline knowing full well that, they don't like them, do they?
No, that's true,
really
yeah. I mean, it works on both levels.
Yes.
They think it's a sinking ship. Well, I mean, people are evacuating it. Not everything that gets evacuated is a sinking ship, but there might be some similarities.
It's true. Nick, the thing about this is, shouldn't you stick it out as a Tory, and even knowing that you're going to lose, shouldn't you just stick it out for the good of the party? I'm not talking about Gove specifically, I'm talking about everyone.
Yeah, I suppose you don't want to sit on the opposition benches. You're lining up some sort of job with Nick Clegg or something at Facebook. You're thinking about your next move. I mean, Gove's been there a long time, hasn't he?
He has.
It is interesting. He was good on education. If you speak to people like Toby Young, who've done a lot of work on free schools, people say he was very strong on education.
Yes.
And he talks about the toll office can take, and I do sympathise with that, because you have to remember the person that ended up killing Sir David Ames was scouting out Michael Gove's house first. So this is very real danger.
No, it's scary.
So you understand that having been through things like that, you might think, oh, I've had enough, especially as we're going to get slammed anyway. The only thing I found strange is his long resignation letter. He said, I've tried to fight for greater social justice, which I found very strange, because you have to remember this, Gove was a Scrutonian Conservative. He was receiving the Salisbury Review at age 16, the late Sir Roger Scruton's magazine.
Yes.
And Scruton was very against the idea of social justice. This is a left-wing concept that is sort of tied in with the kind of zero-sum politics of resentment, he claimed. So for a Conservative to talk about social justice, very, very odd, which might relate to some of the confusion we see in the Conservative Party.
Maybe. I mean, although the social justice means different things to different people, doesn't it? That's the thing. And it can mean something very different to... I mean,
levelling up is...
Exactly, they would say levelling up.
He meant meritocracy, He meant something different, but it's just a strange phrase to come into.
Yes, I suppose it is. I think you're right. I think Gove did do some good things for education and was really... Because he got slammed for it, but actually trying to reintroduce sort of traditional... liberal arts, liberal education, that strikes me as a really good thing. And we're sort of suffering from the fact that we haven't really properly implemented it.
Yeah, slammed by the teachers as well, who didn't particularly like it. It was very much like that. That was a domestic. They could have sorted that out on their own.
Yes, very much so.
He talks about, the massive improvements in math skills and literacy and things like that. So I do think he did some good work there. Yeah. But disaster for Rishi, for someone so big in the party.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not so much concerned about Gove insofar as I just think all of these 72, 73...
78.
Up to 78.
It's 80 since we did.
Yeah, it just keeps ticking up. That's just not a good look, is it? I mean, they really have thrown in the towel from the looks of things. Anyway, we're going to move on to the next story. This is in the Mail on Saturday. What are they leading with?
So they've got Reeves, I'll never play fast and loose with your money, which, of course, is Rachel Reeves, Shadow Chancellor, no doubt going to be the Chancellor. And she's been doing this for a while, this kind of Thatcherite thing. She's talking about sound money. Yeah. And she's talking about she won't soak businesses and crush entrepreneurs and that there won't be the typical tax and spend that we expect from Labour. I mean, I still think there will. I still wonder where any of the money's going to come from or what they're going to be able to do in the position we're in. But apparently...
The magic money tree.
Yeah. But I guess it's another way they're distancing themselves from the left. Starmer's been distancing himself a lot from Corbyn, and now Corbyn's going to be an independent. And so it's very much this new New Labour, maybe.
Yeah, and, you know, the fact that this is one of those articles which is based on the fact that the Daily Mail has got a scoop. You know, Rachel Reeves is writing specifically for them, so if you look inside the paper, you'll have the full interview. And this is the scoop. This is the sort of highlights on the front page. Is that a sign as well, the fact that the Shadow Chancellor is writing for the Daily Mail?
Yeah, well, I mean, it wasn't that long ago that Keir Starmer was writing. Was it in the Telegraph where he said
he
that
got flack for it?
But he got flack. It's not really changed the poll. It's not like he suddenly lost that poll lead by saying, I'll tell you who I think was a great leader, Margaret Thatcher. Poll still does all right, doesn't it?
No, I know Owen Jones was angry about it, but I think, well, you know, for obvious reason. But I think that's the thing, is that they do want to appeal to both sides. You know, the idea that there is such a thing as a Labour voter and a Tory voter, that shouldn't be in your mind as a politician. Every vote should be possible.
Well, as you go into an election, you can't really win with the system that we have if you don't have an offering that is palatable to the centre ground. But no one wants to say it because it's boring, and you do better on social media if you say, no, we should go more in the other direction, let's get more extreme. But when you need an entire nation of people, statistically most of whom don't agree with you, to vote on things, you've got to sell it to the centre group.
But do we trust Labour with the money, Nick? Do you? I mean, they haven't got a great track record, have
No,
they?
and we've got all these debt problems. We've got all sorts of financial problems. I don't see where they're going to get the money. I don't trust them with the money, but I don't trust them with anything. So we're going to be continual collapse.
Do you trust them, Steve?
Well, I actually, even I don't know, because I understand this would be the message that you should put out there.
Yes.
They know the kryptonite for the Labour Party is bad rep to do with money, so send someone there who's going to be like, no, I've got a spreadsheet, and make us feel safe. The balance is on the front page, though, because Boris Johnson's written for them as well, saying Starmer would be the most dangerous and left-wing Labour PM since the 1970s. That sounds like a shocking thing until you think how many have there been.
Yes.
The only caveat I will offer, is I think people like the Bank of England or the ONS, whoever it is, not ONS, that's statistics. What's the one? OBS, which is OBR.
Yeah.
People like that are going to work better with Labour. You know, the people that kind of stitched up Truss, according to Truss, the civil service and so on, they'll work
Everyone
better
that stitched Truss.
with Labour.
Well, she's done a tour, sort of saying that everyone.
The deep state will be on Labour's side, is what I'm saying. So maybe that makes a difference.
Maybe, and of course, Reeves would be the first female Chancellor, so they'd be catching up with the Tories' 2 female Prime Ministers.
3.
3, I'm sorry. It's just
Did you forget that? Which one did
she was
you
only
forget?
there for 40 days. Anyway, let's move on with the next one. This is the Telegraph, and the Telegraph has an inheritance tax story that we're not really interested in.
Yeah, but the headline is Inheritance Tax Against Tory Values, says Hunt.
Yeah.
It's a shame he's not the Chancellor, so we could have fixed this when he did a budget or something. Interesting.
Why doesn't Reeves scrap it?
But anyway, net zero policy could raise pollutant deaths is the story. It's down the bottom, but it is interesting.
Yes.
All of this work to try and achieve net zero includes a lot of insulation. I believe people protested about insulating Britain. We had to, have cars idling on the M25 to improve pollutants. I'm sure that helped. But the point is, you make places too airtight, so the pollutants get trapped in. I mean, the whole article doesn't mention that that's not how it's meant to be. You're meant to have ventilation. You have heat exchangers to warm the cold air coming in.
Yes.
We've got the technology that solves most of the problems they go on about. Yes, if you have a house and you hermetically seal it, it's a bit bad for you. But we've always been terrible as a nation when it comes to caring about pollutants. You know, the rest of the world, when they found out about coal, they had, like, boilers and things. And we were just the one place that went, no, open fire. We want to see the coal and breathe in all the stuff that gets our lungs.
Ah, yes, but it's very romantic. It looks nice of a winter eve.
Yeah. For the first 40 years of your life, until you're coughing up all that black lung.
Absolutely.
No, that's how we conquered the world, open fires.
Yeah.
That's what I believe in. And young boys up chimneys, that's how we did it.
Yeah,
that was our
resilience.
greatest era.
Resilience.
Yeah.
Resilience.
And we had a workforce. We had 100% employment. If you were 10, you worked up a chimney.
Exactly. And, you got emphysema and silicosis and all the rest. But it didn't matter, because we had an empire.
Yeah.
It's the kind of diseases that won us the war.
There we go. We're going to move on now to the Daily Star, and a totally different story. Nick?
It's very different. We've beaten the curse of snoring with didgeridoos, and as you might expect, it's boffins.
They love their boffins,
Yeah, it's
don't
boffins,
they?
it's seagulls. In this case, it's boffins that have come to the rescue. It's Dr. Sophie Bostock. I don't know how she feels about being called a boffin, but she has said that learning to play the didgeridoo can cure snoring somehow. I've skimmed it, but it's something to do with sleep apnea.
Who's the chap on the front cover who's snoring?
I believe it's Stock Image.
Oh, Stock Image. I'm familiar with his work.
Christopher Hitchens, but it's not.
But why is he, he's got a pizza. I think eating late at night might be the problem with that chap, I would suggest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you don't just sleep with your didgeridoo.
Weight issue as well, maybe.
How do you... Steve, you're a didgeridoo expert. How does it cure snoring?
It's to do with strengthening up the muscles, and especially the tongue, but a bit further back.
Yes.
And it just means that stuff then doesn't collapse in when you fall asleep.
Can you demonstrate? You have a
Well, it
device.
just so happens I always travel with my didgeridoo.
Yes.
And normally I've got a longer one than this. But...
Oh, boaster.
Yeah, he's been bringing it in for 2 years. This is the first time it's been useful.
Can't believe I keep emailing boffins, and this is the first time they've actually written about it.
And there we go. You finally
That was probably cultural appropriation.
Oh, almost certainly. I don't really believe you're playing that properly.
No, what I'm doing, I'll show you. I'm making the didgeridoo sound.
Yeah, that's what they all do. They're frauds.
They're all frauds.
Every didgeridoo player is a fraud. OK, so, well, that's the end of part one, but coming up in part two, we're going to be discussing Keir Starmer's plans north of the border, the counter-protest in London, and the UN's top court's directive for Israel. Please do not go anywhere.
Britain's newsroom. Weekday mornings from 9:30.
Well, we're delighted about this because the boss of JD Wetherspoon has credited demand for fashionable Guinness as the pub chain reported a jump in sales.
Now, Guinness has benefited from a boom in demand over recent years, shaking off its association with rugby lads and old men to appeal to a much younger audience and loads more women.
We've got our Guinness here.
Oh, yeah.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
I'm not sure about this boozing on air at this time of the morning, but I'll let you off on this occasion.
As it's you, Tim, as it's you. Now, Guinness is an acquired taste for many people, so I'm surprised it's become so popular.
Yes, it is a real surprise. I think it's always been a popular drink among the demographic you mentioned, the older guy. There's about 80 or 90% of pub trade over the last 30 or 40 years, and probably longer, are a similar range of products. But there's a varying 10, 20% according to fashion. You had vodka Red Bull 20 years ago. You had an Irish cider poured over ice, which came from no one knows where. You had Alco Pops. So there's an unpredictable range of products which have been the fashion of the moment. But the fashion of the moment, very unpredictably this time, is Guinness. And no one knows why. As you say, it's an acquired taste. Young people tend not to like it. Most of the fashionable drinks over the decades have been quite sweet. And Guinness obviously isn't. So, yes, I think the Guinness brewery, St James's Gate in Dublin, they'll say it's brilliant marketing. But like the rest of us, they rely a bit on luck.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio, and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners, your first look at Saturday's newspapers with me, Andrew Doyle, and my comedian buddies, Steve N. Allen and Nick Dixon. We don't use the word buddies enough, do we? I like it. I'm going to bring it back. Anyway, I should say that we are actually hosting a night with the Headliners live. That's stand-up comedy with us lot, stand-up comedians. You can come along and join us for an evening of comedy. That'll be in London on the 3rd of June, and you can meet us all. Chat with us in the bar afterwards. I'll be there doing a bit of a set. Leo Kearse will be performing. Simon Evans will be performing. Josh Howie will be performing. All on the 3rd of June. If you want to come along to that, for more information, just scan the QR code that is presently on the screen right now. So get up and scan it because it's about to disappear. Or you can visit gbnews.com. That's the other alternative. But do come along and enjoy the show and say hello. Anyway, we're going to begin this section now with Saturday's Telegraph. Keir Starmer has his sights set on Scotland. Steve.
Yeah, Starmer says he needs to win Scotland to become Prime Minister. Then you read the article and you realise he's not saying he needs to. He's saying, I need to, in that case. Like,
he doesn't
mathematically...
need it, does he? Like, he could not win a single seat in Scotland and still have enough if the polls are accurate.
Yes. Although the more seats he gets in Scotland, Labour gets in Scotland, the less of an unprecedented swing is required elsewhere.
Yes.
So it would be beneficial. But he's saying need as in kind of like, hey, come on, guy, I need you. No, don't walk out on me. I need you right now. And the reason is
Needs
because...
him emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, he's not really playing the game, is it? Like, everyone else has done the stuff for him. He stands a good chance of doing well in Scotland because the SNP imploded. In the same way he does well elsewhere because of the Tories. This is like a fight scene in the 1981 film Condor Man. It's not a reference everyone's going to get, but...
No. In 3 days of the Condor. What's Condor Man?
Condor Man is Michael Crawford as an agent, but he doesn't really know he's a spy, and he keeps... You know, like in comedy where he'll just duck down to pick up a case while a bullet goes past him?
Michael Crawford is in Some Mothers Do Ours.
So it's a comedy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, 1981's Condor
well, look,
Man.
if you'd have hit us with Lawnmower Man, then Nick and I would have got
But there were no fight
really
scenes
obscure.
where the bad guys beat themselves up accidentally, and that's exactly... Politically, it's a better reference than you're all giving me credit
I
for.
actually love the idea of this film, so I'm going to watch it.
No one in the country has watched that film.
No,
Steve.
nobody.
Lost. Everyone's just turned off.
Honestly,
our ratings for tonight will show at that exact second everyone clicked off.
I googled it to make sure it wasn't like a cheese dream. That I was thinking Michael Crawford in a film.
Let's move it back to the story. Are you
It's like the new Lewis Schaefer.
Are you slightly? Have you have mixed feelings about this insofar as Labour, taking over Scotland wouldn't be great. On the other hand, it's quite nice the idea that the SNP's grip, their one-party grip over Scotland, will finally be obliterated.
Tricky one for me. Yeah, it's like, who do I want to win the league, Liverpool or Man City? It's one of those. Yeah, I hate the SNP, I hate Labour, I hate Scotland. So it's like, no, I'm joking, guys, joking about that. I just thought it'd be Sunday.
You set fire to that kilt earlier. I saw you.
Scottish cousins, love Scotland, great people. But the thing is, great golf courses. The thing is. Yes, Andy, it'd be great to obliterate the SNP. They would deserve it. Their weakness, though, will allow this crushing Labour majority. I mean, I don't think Tony Blair, in one of his landslides, even needed Scotland. They won't need Scotland, as you say. He just wants Scotland. I love this sense. The numbers are important, but there's something very deep about the way I see politics. Is there?
Yes.
Or is it just complete opportunism and shallowness?
Yeah. Does he have an affiliation for Scotland? Did he go to school in Scotland? Well, Blair did. Blair
did, yeah.
His dad was a Scottish toolmaker.
Was he Scottish?
I've no idea, no. Today he probably was.
Yeah. He's making the point, though, that because they have had a situation where the parties that they vote for aren't the ones running the country.
Yes.
And then you can moan about it, but the same is true. That's the system. There are places in the southwest that vote Lib Dem, and they're never going to have a Prime Minister. So basically, Scotland does tend to make itself the belle of the ball a little bit, kind of like, impress us.
OK. Well, let's stick with the Telegraph now. Is Rishi bending the rules for Lord Frost?
Rishi insists Lord Frost could stand for Tories in general election. It was claimed he couldn't, but now he can. I mean, I'd say it's a non-story, but people seem to think that's a Lewis Schaefer catchphrase, as if he invented that term. But anyway, so even if there...
He didn't. He popularised it.
I think it was... People were saying it.
Were they?
For a long while.
Were they?
People had a story that really didn't have a lot of detail in it. People didn't go, oh, it's like an empty story.
Non-story was known. He'll be crushed. I hope he's not watching.
So even if they had a plan to stop Lord Frost standing, they wouldn't do now, because they've run out of so many MPs. So by the time we finish this bit, it'll be up to 85.
Yeah.
They would take anyone. They'd ask that guy back with the offer of, like, what tractor, so we can look at the porn again, that Neil Parrish.
That guy? I think they should bring him back. Who hasn't? Anyway, Nick, what do you make of this?
Well, I've actually asked David myself, trying to get an exclusive, but he said, I'll tell you when I've got a minute. So hopefully by the Weekly Sceptic on Tuesday, but I didn't manage to get the exclusive. But because he did admit, he's not surprised that it's confusing, because at one point it was like he's barred, and then I read Sunak saying, no, of course he's not barred. That's ludicrous.
Well, so he's thinking of dropping out that Lord.
He would drop out of the being a Lord just so he could run.
Right.
But he claimed in the Telegraph, and this is out there, he said, I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for clarifying. He said, I wasn't clear whether I could apply to stand for the Commons this election. But he's saying it's very late in the process, time is short, but I'll now consider the options. So what you might assume from this is that they maybe didn't want him, they weren't thrilled about him standing. Maybe the conspiracy would be...
But why not? Is it because he's too right-wing?
If you read... Well, yeah, he's a NatCon. He's associated with the sort of NatCon side of the party. There's one thing that this Conservative Party hates, it's Conservatives. And if there's another thing they hate, it's Boris Johnson. If there's another thing they hate, it's winning. And he's associated with all three of those. So, of course, they don't want Frost. That's my theory. But if you read that piece in the Telegraph a while ago, people like Aman Bogle, who's a contributed to GB News, and people like David Campbell-Bannerman said they effectively banned him from standing. So there are ways they make it difficult, subtle ways. So it sounds a bit to me like it's been that. I mean, why wouldn't they make it clear to him, yes, we definitely want you to stand? You know, why would they leave it to the last minute and make it difficult? That's
so weird, Steve. Can't we go back to the good old days when Labour stood for the working class rather than the middle class, you know, because it's called Labour, and the Conservatives were Conservative? That would be great, just so that we have the choice. I'd like them both to do that.
But sadly, the system has edged itself into... Again, it's all about... The parties get so close, because otherwise, if you're an outlier, you'd never win. So they all compete for the same ground. They have the same policies.
Maybe if everyone just did what it said on the tin. Maybe if the Liberal Democrats were you know, liberal and democratic again.
Yeah.
You know, I believe in sort of just...
If the Greens were green...
Well, rather than going on about gender all the time, maybe talk about the planet again.
Well, there's other things they've been going on about recently.
Yeah.
Green peace be upon him, I believe is the phrase.
OK, we're going to... This is true. We're going to move on to the Daily Mail now, and a protest in North London. Nick, what's this?
Well, it's pro-Palestine and pro-Palestine... I just said pro-Palestine twice. I've gone absolutely mad.
Bias.
Pro-Israel. What's the other one? Israel. I don't work.
You're not up on this conflict,
I know,
are you?
I don't work with Josh enough, so I didn't know what the other one was called. So it's pro-Israel and pro-Palestine crowds clash outside historic North London cinema hours after venue was daubed in red paint for showing film about Hamas's October 7 atrocities. So it's the old Phoenix in East Finchley, one of the oldest cinemas in London, built in 1910, opened 1912, and it's thought to be the oldest cinema in continuous use, so that's its claim to fame. But now it's a place where people fight about foreign conflicts outside. So because they showed this film, The Supernova, the music festival massacre, that was thought to be terrible. It's thought to be part of art washing, which is this phrase.
What does that mean?
We've had sports washing, now it's art washing. You do art to try and promote a political cause.
Can you explain this to me, though? Because the pro-Palestine protesters were saying, if you show this film, it's basically trying to cover up all of the atrocities that they claim Israel is committing. Why can't you show a film about the massacre, the genocidal, maniacal pogrom that took place on October the 7th, without that being seen as washing over something else? What's it got to do with that?
Yeah, you should be able to. I think you're speaking to the... We weren't on that protest.
Well, did I say it in a tone that... I wasn't accusing you, Steve.
I totally
agree.
I wasn't able just to wind up Josh. But
explain to me... And also, these people who are protesting, if they don't want to watch the film, they don't have to buy a ticket to the film.
Definitely. That's a strong argument that they're way past. I think also, while ever there are hostages not released, stop moaning about films. There's a perspective there, isn't there? Like, oh, there's someone showing a film you disagree with. Hostages need to be released, get some perspective. They said they were going there for a vigil, but clearly turned up with some red paint to do some daubing.
Yes.
I don't take paint on a vigil. I guess there's many questions in there. Can I just say the one thing that did make me feel a bit more cheered by the attitudes, because there were protesters on both sides and there was some friction. One man shouted to the pro-Palestine protesters, F-word scum, protecting rapists, F-word paedophiles, and then chanted the W word. And that's the one I did think, it's London, isn't it? That's what you shout at people.
Yes,
yeah,
that's
kind
true. There's something going on with people's moral compass, isn't there, Nick? Insofar as, you know, I've seen people posting images, horrible images of the hostages who are either killed, raped, who are still in captivity, hopefully not dead. And I've seen left-wing activists retweet it saying, yeah, well, they shouldn't have been dancing so near to Palestine, should they? They shouldn't have been so near to Gaza. It's their fault. You know, real kind of a complete vacuum where your heart should be. I mean, that's what I'm seeing, basically. What's going on there?
People have lost their humanity in service of ideology. We saw it on the day of October 7th when Rivka Brown said it was a day of celebration. And ever since then, we've just seen more and more of that. And you could say we've seen it on both sides, but certainly we've definitely seen that on the radical
yeah, but you say that, but I haven't seen anyone celebrating or the death of innocent people in Gaza. I haven't seen that at all.
No, I haven't seen that as much. I meant perhaps some would argue we've seen it in the overzealous response of Israel. That's what they would say.
Right, but there isn't a moral equivalent here, is there? You know, I mean, we're talking about an army that is trying its uttermost to avoid civilian casualties versus a terrorist group that uses rape as a weapon and murder and specifically target civilians. And if you can't see the difference between those two things, I think there is something wrong with your moral compass. Am I wrong?
No, but I think if your moral compass is that faulty, of course you don't understand that a film should be shown. Yeah, and also this thing of daubing it with red paint. I mean, I just think they did the same to the Shoah Memorial in Paris, which I think is clearly anti-Semitic. It's a clearly anti-Semitic thing to do. Anyway, we're going to finish this section with the weekend and the International Court of Justice. Clear instructions for Israel from them. Yeah, halt. UN's top court orders Israel to halt Rafah offensive, citing immense risk. So this ICJ is not convinced that the evacuation efforts for Palestinian civilians will be sufficient to alleviate the risk. Yes. Israel's not actually said what it says here. They've not said what they will do to keep the population safe during the evacuation of the city, or provide food, water or sanitation. It's important for context before we plough on as well. The ICJ has no way of enforcing this ruling, so it's just words.
Right.
But Israel responded with anger, and its finance minister said that demanding that they stop the war is demanding the end of Israel. They're not demanding that you stop the war permanently. This is a halt until the details are coming in. They've also said, the opposition leader said, that there's a moral collapse, moral disaster for failing to link the halting of the fighting with the freeing of the hostages. Yes, I think whenever the discussion is had, the first thing that needs to be put out there so it can't be brought up later is, of course, the hostages should be freed immediately. But again, Israel has the right to defend itself, but it doesn't mean you can do absolutely anything. And if the only thing that's being asked for right now is details about how you're protecting the civilians...
Yes.
This war doesn't have to stop. This offensive doesn't have to stop.
Nick, what do you make of the argument that, you know, if they don't go into Rafah and eliminate Hamas, then this will have, you know, they'll effectively giving a green light for Hamas to repeat what happened on October the 7th?
Yeah, well, that is the argument now. It's either the total eradication of Hamas or nothing. And the problem with that is, although I can see that side of it, along the way, you alienate more and more of the international community, which is, I'm just trying to say that dispassionately, that's just what's happening with the Rafah invasion. So that's the danger, that's the risk of what Netanyahu is doing. And I'm quite dispassionate because people are obviously highly emotional on both sides about this issue, but I'm kind of not, so I'm just trying to be very rational about it.
Yeah, Nick, the sensible, rational one.
That's me.
That's you in a nutshell. OK, we're at the halfway point. Do join us in part 3 for a row over literature, the police being shown up by a granny, and a debate about razor blades in prison. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. This weekend it's going to be a bit of a mixed bank holiday. The driest weather expected on Saturday for most of us. Will turn a bit more unsettled as the weekend goes on. But through this evening, the pressure pattern really settles down, and that will set us up for a much drier and colder night to come tonight. There are areas of cloud and rain we've seen across northern areas will slowly drift northwards through the next few hours, and these clearer skies across the south will become more widespread, pushing into parts of southern Scotland by the morning. There's a chance of some mist and fog across some southern counties, and it's going to be a fresh start. As I say, temperatures could be down as low as 3 or 4 degrees across parts of Wales, southern areas of England as well. But it will warm up fairly quickly as the sun will shine first thing. We could see some sunshine first thing across the northeast of Scotland, where we're sheltered from that more southerly wind. Thicker cloud, though, further south and west. Still some drizzly rain, but I think things will improve through the day here. Elsewhere across much of England and Wales, it will be a dry and bright start, but some mist and fog may allow some drizzly rain. Notice, though, we do have this area of quite persistent rain moving into the south and east. That's moving in from parts of Europe, and that could bring some very heavy rain to eastern areas potentially. So a bit of a wet day is on the cards for eastern areas of England. Just some areas, actually most of us, should stay dry through the day on Saturday, and it's going to feel much warmer than it has done today. Highs of around 22 degrees in the south, closer to 19 degrees across the north. But under the cloud, it's going to be a bit of a disappointing day. Things turn much more unsettled on Sunday. Bands of showery rain will push north and eastwards through the day. Some more persistent rain for northern areas, heavy, possibly thundery downpours across many central and southern areas, and that could bring some localised disruption, perhaps some flooding and spray on the roads, and it will likely stay unsettled into the half-term week.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
Yeah, for dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News. Weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people. To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. It's your first look at Saturday's newspapers. We're going to begin this section with news that some Italian kids are getting out of doing their homework. That can't be fair, can it, Nick?
Yeah, well, this is one way. It's backlash as Muslim children in Italy exempted from studying Dante. So the problem comes because he refers to Muhammad and his cousin Ali being in hell. He said, "How is Muhammad mangled? Before me walks Ali weeping, from the chin his face cleft to the forelock." So the thing is, the Muslims don't want to read this. Now, you could make an argument that they could just read it as literature or just without agreeing with it. You know, Jesus isn't treated that well at times in the Bible. We can still read it. It doesn't mean we are endorsing what happens. So
yes.
In my book, they could read it, but
it is literature.
Not in their book.
Of course they should read the foundational poetry of the Italian culture.
You would think so, but no. And it's similar to the Michaela School controversy about the prayers in this country.
Yes.
Should Muslims be exempted from the rules about not following any religion in that school, the secular rules they have? Very similar. One thing I really noted, though, was that in Italy, things are a little bit different to the tone in this country, because the centre-left party, Azione, which means action, and I didn't pronounce it well, talked about this. They said, this is not tolerance nor integration. It is the suicide of the West. Can you imagine the centre-left in this country talking like that? So everyone, all sides in Italy have been vehemently against this, saying, of course you should study Dante. I mean, they really like Dante there, but...
Well, as they should, but I mean, this is the point, is that if you start saying that we should exempt certain individuals from studying important classic works of literature, where does that end? You'll have Jewish students saying they won't study Merchant of Venice. You'll have, as they said at Michaela School, as Catherine Berbosing pointed out, you'll have Jehovah's Witnesses saying, because they've complained, saying they don't want to study Macbeth because of the witches and they don't support the occult. You know, actually, you've got to just get over... You know, this is why I think maybe secularism in schools is kind of important. What do you think?
Oh, this is the kind of story that really bothers me, because it's an example of people thinking they deserve extra rights because they're religious.
Yes.
Oh, I mean, firstly, it's fiction as well. This is not like you don't even have to look at an actual thing. You're reading a thought that someone wrote down and made up. Then again, religions are kind of based on fiction, so that's a weak point that I've got there.
Oof, blimey. You're going to wind Nick up right now, Steve.
I thought that...
classic atheist talking points from about 1960, whatever.
This is exactly the same, I don't have thoughts from 1960. I wasn't around. But these are the ones that I have now. No, but it's the same argument that people had about banning the life of Brian. You don't have special... You're not precious because someone's offended your religion, and yet the people who were saying you shouldn't ban the life of Brian should also be saying, just read this book.
Well, also, Dante, you know, Dante puts his mates into hell, the ones that annoyed him in his lifetime. He gets back at them by putting them in hell, being tortured in all sorts of ways. You know,
he was mates with Muhammad, is that what you're saying?
No, I'm not saying that. And also, actually, anyone who's non-Christian is in hell. Even some of the great...
I'm glad you've admitted that.
From pagan antiquity are in hell.
Oh, you mean in the poem?
In the poem, they're in the... You get people like Homer and Aristotle and Cicero in the first circle of hell, which is like the nicest bit of hell, because although they are really good people, they were unfortunately born before Christ, so they couldn't have been baptised, so they have to be in hell.
That can't be the argument to win the argument, though. Do you know what I mean?
Why not?
It's like, but don't worry, he puts other people in hell too. No, you should be reading it because you shouldn't stop reading it just because it mentions your religion.
Can I just counter Steve's sort of horrific sort of anti-Christian sentiment? I personally don't believe we should be secular. I believe England and Britain are Christian countries, so it's OK. The king is the head of the Church of England. It's OK to be Christian, and in Muslim countries, it's OK to promote those values. I don't think everything should have to be secular. That's my...
I'm just saying you don't get special rights for it, though. You
do. In this country, Christianity should have special rights because it's a Christian country.
No, but
in Saudi Arabia, Islam should have special rights.
OK, but by that logic, should we be able to say, well, Christians should be able to object to important literary texts on the basis of their faith?
Yes.
And not study them? Well, that makes you a Philistine.
Yes,
no,
you believe
it doesn't. It makes me want a theocracy.
You want a theocracy? Well, at least you admit it. We're going to move on now to The Guardian next. This is about a literary event. One of your favourite topics?
Yeah, Hay Festival. I thought it was a festival about farming. I was wrong about that. I thought it's when they put the straw in the bales. Hay Festival drops main sponsor after boycott over Israel and fossil fuel links.
Yes.
The singer Charlotte Church and the comedian Nish Kumar. And now I see why I've been given this story. If you expect any inside goss, if there was a MASH Report WhatsApp group, I was never asked to join it.
Yes.
So the executive has said, above all else, we must preserve the freedom of our stages and spaces for open debate and discussion where audiences can hear a range of perspectives. And we will do this by banning these sponsors.
I mean, why is it, you know, if authors say, I don't approve of the sponsor, the corporate sponsor of this particular event, why don't the organisers say, OK, well, then just don't appear at the event. We'll get another author. There's loads of them. Like, why do we care what Charlotte Church thinks?
It's madness. I mean, they say this is preserving the freedom of our stages and spaces. I'm like, freedom, as you say, by cancelling things, absolute insane Orwellian nonsense. But also, I don't know loads about this particular sponsor, but I look and go, Charlotte Church, Kumar, George Monbiot. So I just basically go, it's all the worst people. So I'll just think the opposite.
I mean,
it's a simple heuristic.
George turned up, though. He didn't boycott it.
Well, this is...
but he's still saying some mental things.
This is to do with the environment, of course. This is what's it called? Bailey Gifford.
Yeah.
So it is to do with the environment. They're worried about that, but they also link in Palestine. And one of the spokespeople said they believe that solidarity with Palestine and climate justice are inextricably linked because it's the omni-cause. You know, this phrase that's being used. Basically, they all run by a set of rules. If we support that, we have to support that.
You got to love Meghan.
Hence Greta Thunberg doing her thing.
It's the watermelon. But if Monbiot was a signatory to the FFB statement, that's what it was.
But yeah, he still planned to turn up. But so the Bailey Gifford have actually said only 2% of the clients' money are invested in companies with some links to fossil fuels, and compared to the market average of 11.
Yes.
And the spokesperson said our clients set the parameters to determine what to exclude or divest, which actually means if you want this company to no longer invest its money in the causes you don't like, you should let them advertise or promote themselves at a place where there'll be loads of people who are like-minded, like, I don't know, a literary festival.
OK, all right, well, let's move on now to the Times. And the word frumpy hasn't been heard in a while, so glad it's back in the news. Nick.
Yeah, calling a woman frumpy could be sex harassment, judge rules. Not sexual harassment, it's sex harassment, which is just based on your sex, I guess. And this is it was a deputy director at Greenland Investment Management, someone called Huan Zhang, who claimed that... Anyway, she was wearing these trousers, and the company's deputy personnel director said that she looked like a frumpy grandmother or auntie. There's a slight translation issue with the whole thing. No one quite knows exactly what was said, but it wasn't great.
It's not very professional,
It's not very professional. It's rude. It's not something you say. But, of course, it's also, as you guys were both saying to me in the break, you know, the problem is women in the workplace.
We weren't saying that, Nick. We were actually saying even more controversial things than that. But what I would say about this, you know, is that, you know, people talk about it's a free speech issue, and this is definitely not a free speech issue because you sign a contract saying you're going to behave a certain way in the workplace, and that means you don't come into work and say, look at you fat frump.
Yeah, I mean, the point that they're making about the translation means we don't know if it was frumpy grandmother or frumpy aunt, as if that would make it OK. I'm a frumpy aunt. Sorry, I didn't realise you meant...
Maybe that is different.
Yeah, it's not, is it?
Then it's not ageist, at least.
Frump's the problem.
Yes.
And, I don't think you should call people frumpy grandmas, but out of politeness, I don't necessarily think it should become a legal issue.
No. Yeah, but
we've not
what
also
I mean is in the workplace. You should be able to go off and call people frumps however much you like, right? But in the workplace, you've kind of agreed...
But importantly,
should it be a legal issue or just an agreement?
We've not seen the trousers, though. We cannot judge on this.
We haven't seen the trousers. You're right, Nick. It shouldn't be a legal issue. It should be something that's settled within the company, surely. I would have thought, anyway.
Whereas harassment sounds like a crime that would be not just an HR issue.
I see.
Could you say, the article also lists other things that judges have or haven't said are an issue. It's not racist, right at the end of the story, not racist to say to Japanese staff members, I like sushi, according to one judge.
Yeah.
It depends on the accent.
Yeah, that was a recent story, yeah.
OK, we're going to move on now to this story about a granny, Steve. A vigilante granny, my favourite type of story. A bit like Super Gran, do you remember that?
Yeah, but not a frumpy gran. You can't say that these days.
She was pretty frumpy, mine.
How very dare you. I'll wring your neck, grandmother reprimanded by police after shouting at gate vandals. So teenagers broke Gillian Mears' garden gate twice. 500 quid's worth of repairs on this.
Blimey.
She said, if I get my hands on them, I'll wring their neck. And the police rushed round to stop her.
So the police went after the granny for saying, I'll wring your neck, to the people trashing her gate, the teenagers trashing her gate.
She's 70. Disabled husband went out there to stop them. He fell over. They mocked and laughed at him when she went around to pick him up. And by the way, you know, if you're a teenager and a disabled man and a 70-year-old grandmother can wring your neck, you lost that fight fair and square. If your neck is so fragile that a granny can wring it, you had it coming.
Nick, the phrase, I'll wring your neck, is very, very common. I've used it to children at school as a teacher, right? It doesn't mean you're actually going to do it. If this grandmother was actually planning on murdering these teenagers, she wouldn't declare the method so specifically.
It's a great point. And a phrase I use a lot, it's in danger of becoming overused, is anarcho-tyranny. This is another example. It's a rather quaint English example, but it is an example of that. It's punishing the innocent and siding with the criminal.
Right.
And this is the philosophy now that we live under.
It's insane. Go on.
Can I just say, they damaged the gate twice. They have asked for 3 other fences to be taken into consideration.
Very funny. Very funny.
It's old school, but I'm sticking with it.
Well done, Steve. We're going to move on now. That is it for part 3. But look, do come back, because in the final section, we're going to be looking at the controversial reenactment costumes a strange way to own your trumpet, and a beer you've never heard of. See you soon.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Have government done enough, do you think, to actually help them out?
I think there will be occasions where people have tried to run a venture, whether it be a pub, a restaurant or anything sort of like that, in the hospitality sector, and it hasn't become commercially viable because of costs, because of bad accounting or because of bad business people. That is just a fact of life. That happens in every sector. So there will be pubs that are closing because they've been poorly run. But I do think there will be occasions where people are forced out of the market. So if local councils aren't being able to pass on business rates, for example, maybe central government can do more. It always tries to do more to cut beer duty and things like that to keep pubs going. So I don't think it's necessarily just as plain as what James is saying, is that, you know, bad pubs will just inevitably be falling by the wayside.
The idea that you two gentlemen, you raging capitalists, support the government stepping in to protect pubs seems to be particularly peculiar. If a pub isn't commercially viable, it has to be allowed to fail.
Well, Sadiq Khan, you know, he has a nighttime czar that he pays well over 100 grand.
Yes.
And businesses are going under like you wouldn't believe in London.
She's a real nightmare.
What's your point?
Well, the point is that Labour aren't exactly helping out these businesses, are they? So
I'm saying that pubs should not be protected by the state. I'm all for a pub.
Well, I'm not suggesting that we subsidise pubs.
That has been suggested. That's what James May is railing against. Although I have to say, it's all very well for James May, and presumably is a very posh gastropub. But if a pub is not fit for purpose, and May makes this point, you know, you've got to have decent, clean loos and a clean pub. And also, realistically, in this day and age, you know, times change. You've got to put on some decent grub as well if you want it to survive. We can't have the government stepping in to save our pubs. And anyway, my understanding over the last 10, 20 years, as a percentage, we haven't lost that many pubs, so they're not going under anytime soon.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. It's your final section and your first look at Saturday's newspapers. We're going to start this section with the news that Nick's weekend has been ruined. Steve, what's this?
World War II event bosses defend reenactors dressed as Nazis. That is, even I think that's harsh about Nick, but
including dressing up.
Dressing up as the SS, Hitler Youth, concentration camp guards. This is in Nottinghamshire, my old stomping ground, and they had people on both sides. There were good people on both sides. If you are reenacting a war, though, I suppose you do have to reenact the other side. Otherwise, people would turn up and think, why did this take so many years?
Yes.
No one's even fighting on the other side. They had a swastika flag. A professor said, an expert in Holocaust history said it seemed a bit celebratory. I'm presuming they didn't win at the end. I didn't see this particular reenactment, but I guess they're staying at least that true to it. He also questioned the logic of people who want to spend time dressed up as a Nazi as a hobby. Yeah, battle reenactment people are weird. We get this. But you need the context.
You do.
Because it's a battle reenactment and you're dressed up as something like... There would be Nazis in the first Captain America film. Should we ban that now? No, because you know the context.
It'd be whitewashing the war if you just took the Nazis out. I mean, you know, it'd be like, well, what was the problem then?
It would be Google Gemini AI-ing the backside out.
Because this isn't, Nick, this isn't like, you know, Prince Harry dressing up as a Nazi with a swastika for a fancy dress party or something like that. Was it a fancy dress party? Or something like that, anyway.
He had some story about that as well, though, that was slightly redeeming. I can't remember.
Oh, was it? Oh, OK. But I'm just saying that caused a big stir.
Yeah.
But he wasn't... But if it's a battle reenactment, it's a bit like if you're in a film about the Nazis, don't you have to wear the Nazi uniform?
I know those people in America love it, don't they? They do the US Civil War. They love doing that. I mean, the professor is complaining. He's saying they're wearing the swastikas in a way that seems a bit celebratory, and he's questioning the logic of people who spend money to dress up as a Nazi as a hobby. I think if it's part of a reenactment, you can do it. If you start to develop policies about fixing the roads and stuff like that, for me, is when you've gone too far.
Yeah, because I've been to an Allo party. And I dressed up as... But I didn't dress up... There were Nazis there, but I dressed up as a...
And they were actual Nazis.
And they were actual Nazis,
They didn't even know it was fancy dress.
You didn't.
You dressed up as the fallen Madonna with a big...
No, I didn't. I dressed as... was it Mimi, the little...
No way, that's more offensive, isn't it?
Is it?
Dressed up as Mimi.
No, I didn't. I was Renee.
Renee Artois.
Anyway, we're getting off topic. Let's move on to the Metro now. Apparently people brag about being stressed.
I know I do, and apparently it's why people don't like me, because it's stress bragging at work has a major downside, right? And one of the downsides is you're seen as less competent and less likeable. So it's good to know. But yeah, if you...
I didn't give you this deliberately, Nick.
People say things, but look, if you're... Because I have talked about being stressed. I mean, this is saying why you shouldn't, but what's really complicated about it, not that complicated, you're seen as more competent if you're seen as stressed. So the problem is not being stressed, but the bragging is the problem, I believe. So I've got to stop bragging as well.
Well, I think it's what a lot of people say self-pity is the most unattractive quality, and I think that's probably, apart from having two heads or something.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Imagine two heads and they're both moaning about how stressed they are.
That'd be awful.
That's the thing. The whole article really overthinks it, really. It's because if you moan about how stressed you are annoying. And that's it. You've got it. I mean, you're tuning up because all I hear is me.
Yeah.
You're stressed. We
Just
get it.
man up and be stoic.
Don't people lack empathy? I mean, what if you are really stressed? I mean...
Do you not think that other people might be stressed as well? This is when people say a problem shared is a problem halved for you, but the person who's listening to you went from no problems to half a problem for someone.
Do you think Marcus Aurelius went around saying, "Oh, I've had such a rough day"? No, he got on with it.
I'm not stressed anymore. People have been trying to cancel me. I've had all sorts going on. I'm totally chill. I'm at one with the flow of the universe.
Me too, Nick. Me too. OK, let's move on to The Guardian now. And what's this about Arab headdresses?
We're very emotional. Kefaya makers' bittersweet reaction to surge in demand. Kefaya, I watched a video on YouTube about how to say it. The video was called How to Pronounce Kefaya brackets correctly.
Wait,
I love that.
Is that the shawl thing?
It's the Yasser Arafat headdress.
Right.
And everyone will know it from that reference. But I love the fact that the video is called How to Pronounce It brackets correctly. As if anyone is going to search for the How to Pronounce It incorrectly. You can do that on your own. You don't need a video for it. There's Bella Hadid wore one. There's been an increase in popular culture, I guess, and therefore an increase in sales.
Well, everyone's wearing them. Like Greta Thunberg's wearing one.
Yeah.
Isn't this cultural appropriation?
Well, that's right down the bottom of the article. The person making them said he receives loads of emails asking, is it cultural appropriation? And he says, no, we draw a distinction. You draw a distinction when you're making some money about selling...
Well, actually, I think it was designed by an old white English guy, wasn't it?
Most things are. I mean, you're asking a guy if it was cultural appropriation who just played a didgeridoo, which I found, as an Aborigine...
He played it very well, though.
As someone with Aborigine roots, I found it incredibly offensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yep. OK, well, let's move on to this story now. And this is a controversial drink. Nick.
Yeah, pub that created Osama bin Lager has... I'll give a big Norm Macdonald-esque pause there for you to... Osama bin Lager has a new beer, and it's their most controversial yet. So it's a rural Lincolnshire village pub, good old Lincolnshire, where some of my family are from. They had a Kim Jong ale, pretty good.
That's good, yeah.
Putin porter, bit generic. And now the new one, which is really bad, is the Orange Mussolini, which apparently is a cheeky nod, I don't know why I'm talking like Alan Partridge, towards Donald Trump. It's terrible. Orange Mussolini, it's rubbish, doesn't work.
Doesn't make sense.
Total fake news.
If they want to be controversial, immigrants stout. That would have been controversial.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that would have been very outrageous.
Well, that's what they wanted. They wanted controversial beers.
I think Osama bin Lager does work, doesn't it?
It's good.
It sounds quite alike, and also he wouldn't have drunk the lager. He would have been against that on religious grounds. So it works on a number of ways. Anyway, look, I think we've had enough of that. Look, that's all we've got time for anyway, so let's have a look at the front covers again before we finish on Saturday. So you've got the Daily Mail, who are running with Reeves, I'll never play fast and loose with your money. The Telegraph has got inheritance tax against Tory values, says Hunt. The Guardian is leading with UN top court orders Israel to halt assault on Rafah. The Times is leading with Gove quits politics as more Tories stand down. The Express, now Gove quits. Ministers shock Exit rocks Tories. Very dramatic. The Daily Star. We've beaten the curse of stories with snoring with didgeridoos. That is all we've got time for. Thank you to my guests, Steve Allen and Nick Dixon. We're back tomorrow at 11 o'clock with some other people. And if you're watching at 5 a.m, please do stay tuned, because right now it's time for breakfast.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, welcome to your latest GB News weather update. This weekend is going to be a bit of a mixed bank holiday. The driest weather expected on Saturday for most of us. Will turn a bit more unsettled as the weekend goes on. But through this evening, the pressure pattern really settles down, and that will set us up for a much drier and colder night to come tonight. There are areas of cloud and rain we've seen across northern areas will slowly drift northwards through the next few hours, and these clearer skies across the south will become more widespread, pushing